The Art of the Pull, Part 1, the schematics. My name again, Dave Potter. I'm based out of North Carolina. So introduction for pulling. Really, young kids can pull. Kids can run and kids can block. And that's all the pull is. But if they aren't doing it well, then that's on us as coaches. Because if we don't teach the pull well, then we can't expect our kids to execute it well. As a matter of fact, we shouldn't expect our kids to do anything better than we can teach it. Yet many coaches do. This is why I still hear the most common lament in all of youth football, which is we've got all these young kids who've never played before. Well, that comment tells me that the coach has either little belief in his ability to teach or very little belief in his players' ability to learn. I think he's simply hoping that the kids somehow already know what they're doing. But if we don't teach our players how to pull, how can we expect them to be good at it? I've never had any player come to me already knowing how to pull or how to pull the way that we do it. We've had to teach every player that we've ever had. And I've been running this offense for 26 seasons. So I know the importance of the pull. So if we weren't doing that, then we might as well just pitch the ball to our fast kid and hope that he can get outside and contain. But we cannot blame our kids for what we won't or don't or can't teach. So the pull itself should not be a difficult teach. It's not difficult to execute because pulling is running. And any player can run and any player can block. It doesn't require talent. It requires know-how. And that's where you come in. So they may be slow. They may have poor form. They may have lousy footwork. But each of those are correctable. Kids can be taught. The problem is many kids don't display a lot of ability right away. So their coach is at a loss on what to do with them. So he just writes them off. But like effort, pulling can be taught. And in the next presentation that I do, we're going to talk about teaching effort, teaching physicality, aggression, intensity. And those are teachable components of this. So many coaches' lack of knowledge is often displayed when they blame their players for not already knowing how to do something. We should be blaming our players for not already knowing this basic fundamental. So let's identify the common mistakes that I've often seen first in either at the practices that I've attended of other coaches, or when coaches send me their film, or when coaches tell me what it is that they're seeing. We need to identify what those mistakes are first, because I think that's the quickest road to improvement. Well, the first one is the coach says, I can't find anyone to pull. And we don't find them. We teach them. As I said before, I've never had a player show up already knowing how to do this. But I hear that statement often from coaches. And we don't flip. I know a lot of guys do, and it works for them, and that's fine. But when you flip, you're only having to teach half as many to pull. That's okay too. But we're not flipping, so we're teaching 6 pullers. That's the right guard, the right tackle, the right end, and the left guard, the left tackle, and the left end, and not just the 1s, but the 2s. So it's a minimum of 6. It may be as many as 12. The player stands up out of his stance before he steps. Of course, this is going to slow him down. Now, younger players in particular have a notoriously weak core. And whether we're pulling or not, one of the most common mistakes that we see, flaws in their system, is that they're standing up before they even take a step. Even if they're just blocking, it's stand up and then move. We've got to be able to teach them that they're taking the step at the point of attack when the ball is snapped, that it's not stand up and move forward, it's move forward. The player drop steps, pivots, and turns his body before he steps. This will pull him down. Some pull systems want want the feet to pivot and the body to turn. And this is not going to be as fast as what we do. Players too close to the line of scrimmage. This is going to slow him down for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's going to make sure that he has impact with the defense sooner than later. If we can move him back off the line of scrimmage, he's going to have more time to pull. He's going to have more time to get his pull steps in. Also, if he's closer to the line of scrimmage, it's going to be harder for him to get around the center who could be in his way. Splits are too wide. This will slow them down. We're foot to foot. A lot of people, even double wing coaches, don't necessarily believe in foot to foot. They think there needs to be some daylight, some gap. I'm not a believer in that. We're running behind the shield. The shield is our players. We're not running to daylight. We tell our running backs we're running to darkness. My last high school coaching job was at an air raid school. I was coaching the offensive line. We ran power and we pulled two, but we had wide splits. And what we had to do there, we could pull the backside guard, but we also pulled the H back. So those were our two pulls. There was no way we could pull the tackle given the splits that we had. He was simply too far away. Too much forward lean. So if he's in a stance where his butt is high in the air, or he's making a tent with his fingers, and you're seeing too much pressure on his hand, or once the ball is snapped, he's having to gather his body before he takes a step, he's got too much forward lean. And you're going to have to get some of that pressure off his front end. You're going to have to get some of that pressure off his hand by moving his head up, moving his shoulders up a little bit, moving his butt down just a bit. This is one of the biggest flaws that I've seen watching youth players in practice, is the player waits for their inside lineman to pull first. In other words, the tackle is waiting for the guard to go first, or the tight end is waiting for the tackle to go first, whoever's pulling. This creates gaps, leakage, and it will slow your ball carrier down if he waits for the pullers, as he waits for the pullers to get in front of him. This is also very common. The player moves after the snap instead of with the snap. If you're watching youth football in particular, it really shows up in a pretty obvious way that you can see the cadence gets hollered, the ball gets snapped, and then play begins. Now, it's not as big and deliberate as the example that I just pointed out there, but it's something that's easy to see, it's easy to spot. And if they're moving after the snap as opposed to with the snap of the ball, this is going to slow them down. We pull successfully because of these factors. These are the things that we implement to help us pull effectively. Our feet are off the line of scrimmage as far as legally possible. Helmet has to be able to be even with the center's hip. That's how far back we are. Our center looks like he's a man out there alone by himself. Our guard's down hand is touching the center's heel. That's how far back we are. And we teach his inside hand down. So the guard is not going to put his hand outside or to the side of the center's foot. He's actually touching the back of the heel. This does two things. This gets him as far away from the line of scrimmage as we possibly can be. It also pulls him in tighter to behind the center. Because think about it. If his down hand is on the side of the center's cleat, he's not going to be as close to being able to pull as if his hand were behind the center. So we're moving him over as far as we possibly can. And obviously part of his body is actually behind the center. But again, as long as his hat is even with the center's hip, we're legal. Oh, also on the guard's down hand, that means if we are the left guard, our right hand is in the dirt. And if we are the right guard, our left hand is in the dirt. And I know some coaches feel uncomfortable about dictating inside hand down at the youth level, but we've insisted that it be done that way. We acknowledge to the players, if you're not used to it, this is something that you're going to have to get used to. But as we know, playing successful football is not about being comfortable. And so, in other words, it is something that's learned. We don't think of it as a big deal. We just know it's something that it has to be done, and it has to be done this way. So with our guards down hand touching the center's heel, having that inside hand down, we're able to block forward. And if we're on the left side, we're blocking at 2 o'clock, what we call 2 o'clock. And if we're on the right side, we're blocking at 10 o'clock. So we're moving forward. It's not a lateral pull. So our pull angles are very similar to our angles in a down block. And down blocking is our default for our play side. So our guys know how to down block. They know what the down block is. They're used to the down block. They're comfortable with the down block. So when we teach pulling, we're essentially teaching the down block. So if we're on the left side, we're taking our angle to the right at 2 o'clock. If we're on the right side of the center, then we're essentially pulling or down blocking to the left at 10 o'clock. We're already comfortable with pulling because we already know how it is we down block. Since we don't pull flat, we don't have to teach the traditional components of a flat pull. We don't have to teach a bucket step. We don't have to drop the elbow back. Since we only pull forward, we only have to be able to run, which is what any player can do. And since we use severe angle blocking, our center is always blocking down, which clears a path for the pullers. Our quarterback straight arms the snap, and I will demonstrate this on the screen. That's essentially it. He straight arms the snap like this. Arms are straight out. This allows him to stand as deeply as possible behind the center, clearing the path for the pullers. Now we use a dead snap with the laces turned towards the quarterback's dominant hand so that the laces are already in his hand and he doesn't have to find them. Now, when I say his arms are straight out in front of him, they're still angled down because he's still got to get them underneath the center's butt. But he's not hunkered tight over the top of that center that we traditionally see. He's going to stand back, and that gap gives us more room to pull. We have no splits. This helps with the distance of the pull and being able to get around the center sooner. We move on the snap, not after the snap. This gives us a step advantage over the defense, who usually delay their movement until after the snap. Guards, tackles, and ends. For us, they are all moving at once. We have them race. Pullers are racing to beat each other out of their stance, whether it's a 3-point or a 2-point. Even though the pulling guard may have a shorter distance, the pulling tackle has an inside lane. And if you pull your tight end like we do, he has an additional inside lane. So the distance in which they're going is still the same. Foot fire drills, also known as ladder drills. They are EDDs for us, everyday drills for our linemen. We demand accuracy, not speed. Speed will naturally occur with repetition. I know a lot of coaches aren't big on foot fire drills. I'm going to talk more in the next presentation about how we implement them and the benefit that we've gotten from them. But it's absolutely mandatory for us that we do this, because the bang that we get, the bang for the buck that we get from ladder drills has been, it's been huge. Number 13, in a 2-point stance, we will use an inside foot stagger. Some of you may be mandated by using a 2-point stance nowadays because of the rules. And if you're using that, if you stagger your inside foot, if that's what you're teaching, this is going to turn the hips of that player more to the inside. So this is going to help him on his down block. This is going to help him on his pull. This is going to help him on his wedge block because he can fit into it sooner. He does not have to turn his body to do these things. It's almost like a pre-turn. For a 3-point stance, we're still using the inside stagger because our inside hand is down. That means our inside foot is dropped back. Okay, that inside hand down helps our guard to mark how deep to line up off the center. If you're using a 2-point stance, you're going to have to rep that a different way, more of a different kind of adjustment, where you're just looking eyeball to hip to see where you need to be. Our wingback is not outrunning his pullers. He runs behind them. So that's another common issue that I see. But our guys are taught to run behind the shield, run to darkness, not to daylight. So that's 14 factors right there of why we're able to pull successfully. Now I'm going to list some of the questions that I get asked about being able to pull. Some of these I have already talked about. I don't think it's going to hurt to hear it again, though. Do you need an athletic player if you're going to pull with any success? You guys say, I don't have any athletes. I've got heavy, slow kids. Well, no, we are putting lineman types on the offensive line, and they can pull just fine. Otherwise, we wouldn't pull. We just wouldn't have that be a part of our offense if we couldn't do it. And since I've run the double wing at youth and middle school and high school for more than 2 decades, I understand the value of the pull and the importance of teaching it. If we couldn't do it, we wouldn't be doing it, and we sure wouldn't be running the double wing. Isn't pulling harder to execute at the younger levels? Not in my opinion. I've coached both high school and youth, 7 to 9 year olds, and 17 and 18 year olds. It's no harder than it is at the older levels. The components that we use are identical. They're exactly the same. All players can run. So let's not perpetuate the myth that young kids can't do this. 8-year-olds are no harder to teach than 18-year-olds. We just have to understand who our audience is and what they respond because it's a different stimuli. Okay. An 18-year-old, he can be easily distracted by a pretty girl that walks by, whereas an 8-year-old will not. But an 8-year-old can be easily distracted by a bug on the ground, and an 18-year-old won't. They're both distractible. We just have to know what it is that they respond to. Time management. Some coaches complain that they don't have time to teach pulling, and I understand the world of a youth coach, you are stretched with 3 different things at once. You're dealing with kids, you're dealing with chin straps, tie my shoe, parents coming onto the field, any number of things. I get that. So our time is stretched tight. But let's look at how we can save some time. And this is a common time waster that I see. Let's look at repetition, particularly the repetition of stance. I don't know about your example because I may not have been at your practice, but a lot of practices that I see, and I'm out there and I'm watching what's going on the first day of school. And they're teaching all their kids to line up in a 3-point stance. And the coach is going to the first player, and he says, okay, I want your feet shoulder width apart or slightly outside the shoulders. I want you to tense your fingers, put those on the ground. I want your head up. I want your butt down. I want a flat back, and your hands are all over the lineman or the player rather, putting him and posing him where you want everything. And by the time you've all got it finished just right, you say, that's it. That's how I want you to be. Then you move on to the next kid. And you wash, rinse, and repeat. You're doing all the way down the line. So you do it for 20, 30 kids. And you can have, I've seen the assistants out there helping too, and they're struggling along with this because this is kids, a lot of times they're doing this for their first time. It's uncomfortable. They're easily distracted. They're looking around at things, not necessarily focused on things. At the end of the day, you come back to the next practice, you think, okay, we've covered this. We know how to do this. We say everybody in a 3-point stance, and the stances look horrible. And it's like you've never taught it before. And it's like, man, we put 20, 30 minutes into this thing yesterday, and this is the result. This is what it looks like. We can't afford that. We're not getting anything from that. So what I see these coaches do is they're investing a lot of time in stance. And then they're going to teach, now you have stance, now we're going to go to first step or first 2 or 3 steps. So it's stance and footwork. After that, then it's stance and footwork and hands, depending on what it is that you use as your blocking surface, whether it's hands or whether it's shoulder or whether it's flippers, old school, forearms. So now you're teaching the hand component as well. And then it's stance and footwork and hands and leverage contact, meaning the target area, where it is that you're looking to hit the defender, wherever that may be. So then after stance and footwork and hands and target area, what we call leverage contact, then it's stance, footwork, hands, leverage contact, and then finally drive. So out of all this and all this progression, regardless of how many days it took, whether you're able to do this in one day or whether it took you all week, what got rep the most? Stance. What got rep the least? Drive. Which one matters more to you? I know for us, it's drive because that's the block. And we got to have that. And at the youth level, probably on a consistent basis, the worst thing I see in a youth level game is the blocking. Okay. So, so we start at the end. We start with the drive, which means we have to teach, if we're teaching drive, we're having to teach target area, the leverage contact area. And we're also having to teach our implement. Now, we don't use hands. We're forearms. So we're teaching forearms, target, and drive all at the same time. We'll go back later and add the footwork to it. We're going to go back later and add the stance. Because one thing in my years of coaching that I found out, I've seen some kids that had terrible stances that were very good blockers. And I've seen kids that were had beautiful stances, but didn't block very well. That told me that stance, or at least the aesthetic of it, wasn't really all that important. It was what they did at or after the point of contact. So that to me was the most important thing. So that's where we were going to start. That's what we were going to invest our time with. So block successfully, they have to know three aspects: who to block. He must know his assignment or rule within the play, how to block. He must be taught the specific techniques on how you teach blocking. But spending 15 minutes on stance and another 10 minutes on adding steps onto it has nothing to do with what a player should do at or after the point of contact. So we start the teaching aspect at fit, which is contact, and through the entire range of the contact. Because if the majority of time is spent on stance and footwork, then how can players be efficient and successful with the block itself? I've watched guys practice and spend a lot of time with their offensive line, blocking on air and running plays against air, with the coach thinking that somehow he's repping the blocking in it. And then they get to Saturday, and what do I hear him say? You aren't blocking. Block somebody. We've been working on this all week, guys. And I'm thinking, no, you haven't been working on this all week. You've been working against air all week. You haven't been working against contact or starting with contact and working through the entire range of contact. You've been going against cones. You've been going against air. So let's not mistake the two. They're not the same.